Well, I need to do a little series on something in genetics and DNA. Here in Science News, look at this, man's origins. But look at that, genetic intruders. Transposons play a big role in what makes us human. Intruders. Boy, talk about spin doctoring the truth over and over again. So here the article says the difference makers. Yes, these transposons are what make us different. They love to show pictures of a human, usually a tiny human, next to a chimp, since they're much smaller than we are. And look at it. Transposon sculpt our genome. What a transposon is this. You see, DNA is sometimes it wears out, it needs to be repaired. Sometimes in making new copies of DNA, which happens every time a cell splits in half by mitosis, and then transcribing the DNA code into RNA code so that it can then be used to translate the RNA code into proteins that you need all through your body. And that's a lot of what our genetic information is on how to make the proteins that run and structure our bodies. Um, in this process, the parts wear out, the machinery breaks and needs repairs, and we have RNA and DNA repair enzymes that roll up and down the strands, and they find an error, they repair it. They're like little biomolecular robots, nanobots. It's really interesting and beautiful, and the genius of it all, how these things actually work day to day. It's estimated that the repair systems and the correction editing enzymes keep the errors down to 1 in a billion. Everything is perfect 1 out of 1 billion times. But sometimes a DNA molecule, a strand of DNA, will break and it needs to be repaired. And the breaks normally happen at the beginnings and endings of genes. Think of a bunch of link sausages that are linked together while they're still linked. If you had a string of sausages, little breakfast sausages, they'd probably more likely break at the links than they would in between, in the middle of the sausages. And so it is with the genes. Normally, if the DNA molecule breaks, it'll break in between the genes. The X chromosome has over 1,500 genes on that chromosome. So it'd be the spaces, the links in between the genes, like in between the sausages, where it would be weakest, where viral DNA could splice itself in, where our DNA could snap right there, Fragile X syndrome, which is a little bit different, but you get a little dangling piece of the chromosome at the end of the X chromosome. Very different things like that, but it's always about what I'm talking about today anyway, the transposons, these weak parts, weak links in the string of nucleotides that make the genes. In between the genes, it's weaker, and then the long string. Well, if a gene breaks out, or if there is a break, the repair enzymes will splice it back in. Sometimes it comes out and splices right back into the same place perfectly. Sometimes, though, the piece of DNA actually gets spliced back in backwards. It still works, but it's turned around and transposed and then spliced back in reverse. Or the piece could actually end up getting spliced back in to another part of the DNA, maybe even on another chromosome, in the effort to repair it, to put that lost gene back into the chromosomes of a living thing so that it can still be useful and the information won't be forever lost by this accident. Well, we'll see later in the next part of this series that the transposon gene fragments or genes, DNA fragments, are looked at by the evolutionists just like all other biological accidents that only happen 1 in a billion times as the fodder for their whole theory to work. It depends on accidents that nature is trying to correct, and all of nature is geared towards stopping this from happening, not encouraging it to happen, but they depend on these things to make their theories sound good, that maybe nature's doing it on purpose. Maybe the transposons are really doing it on purpose, and they are invaders, intruders. Most of them, well, many of them are not. Some of them come from viruses, but the transposons themselves are our own DNA, our own human DNA that we've had from the beginning. Keep thinking, and we'll talk about this some more tomorrow. God bless, Dr. J.